show for all your latest UFC news and rumors. It's Brian Coyle. It's Sean Stanley. It's the TFM Live podcast. And it's now.
What is going on, everybody? I am Brian Coyle. He is Sean Stanley. This is TFM Live, the official podcast of thefullmountmma.com. You can follow us on Twitter at thefullmount. And Sean, so many things have happened. I don't know where to start, but I guess we have to start with the money. We have to start with Conor McGregor because UFC 196 was 2 weeks away. Everyone was so psyched for it. We're getting a lightweight title bout between Rafael dos Anjos, Conor McGregor. McGregor's opportunity at a second weight belt, a second title belt at a different weight. We haven't, there's so much buildup. Rafael dos Anjos on Monday breaks his foot.
Yeah,
according
sounds about
to
right
his camp.
for Conor McGregor fight.
Yep, and everyone immediately freaks out because, again, like you just said, McGregor's 4 out of his 8 opponents in the UFC have not made it to the fight date.
Yeah. And
they've had to reschedule or they've had to throw somebody in. So this happens in these breaks Tuesday morning. Everyone's pretty much panicking at this point, and we don't know what's going to happen. And reports start flying out. Frankie Edgar's got a torn groin, so Frankie Edgar can't fight. Jose Aldo was just cleared from getting knocked out in December, and he's not in shape, so he's not going to take the fight. Donald Cowboy Cerrone immediately after fighting on Sunday, like a couple days ago, was like, yeah, sure, I'll take the fight because that's the way Cowboy is. Showtime Pettis' camp comes out, basically says, I want the fight. Nate Diaz's camp is coming out and says, I want the fight. Tuesday night's edition of SportsCenter, Dana White goes on, quick hit, says Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor is now the main event of UFC 96. We also found out today that Uriah Faber took the fight as well. So 4 fighters, Cowboy Cerrone, Showtime Pettis, Nate Diaz, and Uriah Faber took the fight, accepted it. Diaz was the one that was chosen, probably in conjunction between what McGregor wanted to do and what they felt would be the best promoted fight. And now we are sitting across at a UFC 196 card headlined by a non-title fight between Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor, competed at welterweight at 170 pounds. Do you feel like this fight now is, crazy as it sounds, more hyped and better than what we were going to get? Are you excited that Diaz is thrown in? Like, is Rafael dos Anjos going down just par for the course for McGregor at this point? I want to get your whole take on this because I haven't been able to talk to you because our schedules haven't matched up, so I'm so excited to talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this fight, it's yeah, I mean, I think Diaz being in there makes it more of a, I thought it would be more of a trash-talking fight. I mean, but looking at what happened yesterday, I don't know. I thought it would be a little, I mean, I know it was a good press conference as far as that goes, but I just thought it would have more to it than what, I guess, what I've seen of it. I haven't seen the whole thing as of yet, but Diaz didn't seem like he wanted to either be there or just can't go with McGregor. But I don't know if it's a better fight as far as, from the standpoint. But I was looking at, when they said McGregor, 4 of his 8 opponents have canceled. So that means 4 of his 8 opponents have been like last minute opponents, pretty much. Then, so. I mean, we were talking. I was talking to a friend today around the water cooler there at work, and they were like, "Do you think this fight this is going to sound crazy to you?" But he was like, "Do you think this fight's gonna sell as far as now that dos Anjos ain't in there?" Mm-hmm. And I'm like, every fight of McGregor's will sell.
Yes.
And I think the one thing, and I was like, to me, the one thing that you keep looking at is it's almost like you buy the pay-per-view for the same reason you were kind of buying the Ronda Rousey fights, because you wanted to, in case somebody actually stepped up and did get the victory, you could say you saw it.
Really?
Yeah.
So he's reached Rousey levels of you just have to watch because he might lose, or just because we want to see Conor McGregor. Of course,
you want to see
fight?
him. I mean, ultimately, you want to see him. But I think for some other people, you want to see, especially as brash of a talker as Conor McGregor is. I would think half the people are watching it hoping and probably knowing that he's not going to get it, but they're hoping that maybe he'll get it.
Mm-hmm.
And it to me, it's interesting to see that they put, Nate Diaz in there. I mean, I know Cowboy just fought. I could have thought that would have been, an opponent in there just to kind of slide in there as far as at least he's had a camp. I mean, I don't know, Nate Diaz has probably been training and this and that, but to take a fight 12 days before and you don't know, like, what shape he's in, and now it's going to be a 5-round fight. I mean, that's a lot to ask.
It's really something. When I heard the news that it was going to be Diaz, to me, from the UFC's perspective, it made a lot of sense.
Oh, no, definitely.
Because Cowboy just fighting, and I know he took care of Cowboy Oliveira very beautifully, I might add, with the triangle submission. Cowboy was on point. He looked great. But Oliveira had no ground game whatsoever, so you have to take the good with the bad there. I didn't think it would be smart to have Cowboy fight immediately because, like you just mentioned, he just fought. I know he just went through a training camp, probably came through that unscathed, but I think for a McGregor-Cowboy fight, I think you want to kind of string that along a little bit long. You want to have a build-up to that. Anthony Pettis, unfortunately, is Showtime we're getting on 5 years, that Showtime kick now?
Yeah.
In WEC.
Yep.
So we're talking a long time ago, and Anthony Pettis, unfortunately, he doesn't draw.
No.
As talented of a fighter he is, he hasn't really drawn. And McGregor pay-per-views are all about drawing and drawing in these big audiences. So he's out.
Yes, he wasn't. I don't even know how he was even. I mean, when you listen to the other names, I don't even know how he was. He was on a very short list, I'm sure.
Yeah, he was a lightweight. Eddie Alvarez was kind of hurt after. You had that. So who is he? Isn't he supposed to fight Barbosa at 197 too, Pettis?
I believe so.
Is that
yeah.
Yeah, because he's coming off the Eddie Alvarez fight. So I didn't think Pettis was. Faber coming out today was interesting because Faber is a guy, I think, that they probably. Faber would have gone up from 135 to 155 for the fight, and McGregor would have done 155. Now I don't know if Conor just felt like eating more the rest of the camp, or completely serious. If he didn't feel like doing the weight cut, or Faber, he's one of the most likable personalities in the entire sport. So it would have been cool. Is that a fight down the line that they would ever want to do, or something like that? I don't know. But Nate Diaz, I forget where it came from. Somebody had a take where it's actually a good thing that there's such a small buildup because Diaz couldn't get himself in trouble with only 11 days.
Yeah, and that still might be pushing it.
I see. And you mentioned it previously, and let's get into it now because that press conference yesterday, I wrote an article that you can find on thefullmountmma.com basically talking about Conor McGregor's mental warfare because Conor does so many different things. It's so tactical when he speaks. He just doesn't say things. He makes sure there's emphasis behind each thing. Mm-hmm. And a couple things I really wanted to get into. And we'll talk about the, frankly, insane, dumb, weird accusations by Nate Diaz, who just basically kind of said everybody's on steroids. Mm-hmm. You're on steroids. And McGregor shot up immediately out of his chair. He's and used words. That press conference was not for children. Let's put it that way. Basically, he was saying.
Yeah, I went to listen to it today, and it was like an Eddie Murphy Raw on TV.
Oh, completely. And you just mentioned one of my favorite stand-ups of all time. But that's besides
I think that's everybody's probably one of everybody.
I hope so. But he basically was yelling at Diaz because they were talking about the weight. And he's like, I don't care. McGregor said, I don't care about weight. Diaz says, they're all on steroids. The only weight I care about is, and Diaz is yelling out, they're all on steroids. And then McGregor goes, man, what are you talking about? Steroids. Don't be putting my name in steroids. I'm major against that. Don't be putting my name in the name of steroids name. Also, McGregor's probably one of the most frequently tested athletes in all of the UFC. So he's not on steroids. And then a reporter had asked Diaz about that allegation they kind of just threw out there. And she said, Nate, you made a pretty bold accusation a couple minutes ago. Do you want to elaborate a little bit? And Diaz goes, what was it? So Diaz is not even paying attention to what he's saying.
He's just reacting on a lot of it.
Yeah. And she said, the steroids comment. He goes, everybody's on steroids. The whole UFC, everybody. Then McGregor, I mean, the guy does his homework. And I don't know if, again, it's a tactical mental warfare thing. And you can read my whole piece, but he said your teammate Gil Melendez and Jake Shields were both caught on steroids, not me, which is true. Shields tested positive for banned substances, and Melendez tested positive for elevated levels of testosterone. And McGregor said, your two teammates were on steroids, you boys, the scrap pack, remember that? Did you know they were taking the stuff? Did you know they were taking the stuff? Did you? Egging them on really bad. And then Diaz's response was just, you're on steroids. So it's completely, I was shocked that Diaz, it was this was the first fight.
Isn't that elementary school level? When you get called something at the playground, you're like, no, you are?
Yeah. And Diaz is a great talker. The Diaz brothers have been, the wolf ticket comment from Nick Diaz back in the day against GSP. These guys used to be the promos, essentially. Conor just took it to a whole nother level. I mean, some of the other quotes I just want to drop, I should create my own belt because I am, in fact, myself, my own belt. It doesn't matter the weight. It doesn't matter featherweight, lightweight, welterweight. It's the McGregor belt, so that's it. I'm fighting for my own belt. Which, I wanted to get your take on that. What do you think of McGregor saying, fighting me is like fighting for a belt, essentially?
Well, I mean, let's think about this now. Say Diaz does what we don't think he will do and somehow pulls out a victory. He's next in line, right?
For the lightweight belt?
When he comes back, or if whatever UFC decides the broken foot's going to take too long to heal and you have to have, a belt holder in place until he comes back to unify the belts. I think if he wins this, he automatically steps into that line.
I mean, I can't argue with that.
So, I mean, in essence, he is fighting for a belt. I mean, because that will elevate him that quickly to, a title contention.
Mm-hmm. And to me, is there any other champion that kind of provides this kind of build-up besides the Rousey Holm fight that we had?
I mean, honestly, when you start looking down, I mean, unless you're probably well-versed in the MMA, I mean, can you name another champion if you just think about it? Besides Holly Holm and Conor McGregor?
I mean, John Jones maybe at his peak?
Well, you mean I thought you meant right now, this instant, all the title holders now. I mean, yeah, maybe John Jones. That way you go with that, or
is that comparing a McGregor fight? Because what McGregor is essentially saying is, I'm the biggest game out there. I don't need a belt. I don't need somebody to this has to be for the title, or this has to be for fighting me is a bigger fight than somebody fighting for the title. Fighting McGregor, it's just a bigger match.
Well, I think for Diaz now, yeah. I mean, seeing where he was at before, now here he is going to be main eventing a pay-per-view against Conor McGregor. I mean, yeah, I have to agree with Conor. I mean, anybody stepping into these roles right now is going to be making a better payday than they would have anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically right. And it's you can call it arrogance, you can call it egotism, you can call it egomania, you can call it whatever you want. But Conor's right, and you have to give him credit for this. I mean, and you can call me a Conor McGregor apologist at that point. What he's bringing to the sport is something I've never seen before, and basically pretty much any sport. with the exception of, I mean, when you had Ali in boxing and the Tyson sort of reigns and that stuff, but nobody talks like Conor does. And he can promote his own fight. Like he can drop these lines that the only weight I give a bleep about is the weight of my checks, and my checks are always super heavyweight. The ladies at the bank love me. Like, it's these like things when you hear it's like, oh, that's a funny line.
Yeah.
And like, oh, what's this guy doing? What's this guy talking about? And it just slowly brings people in. And it's just it's really amazing. You have to be impressed. Even if you hate McGregor, you have to be impressed about the way he does things.
He's built his brand up as far as being that, and that's kind of like what I was saying was I think some people buy the pay-per-view to watch him, fall. They're hoping that he's going to fall,
mm-hmm.
and so far he's not he's proven everybody wrong. I mean, he backs up his talk and he goes about this business and he knows how to carry on the press conference, and as the great late Dusty Rhodes said, he talks people into the seats.
He talks a lot of damn people into the seats. And then a couple other things I wanted to pull from that press conference was he started the fight against Diaz as soon as he took the microphone, because we've talked about it in his previous fights. Nobody can deal with the McGregor heat. No one can deal with the pressure that seems to come on fighting Conor and talking back and forth. And Mendez tried to talk with him. It didn't work. And, of course, Chad had a really short camp and was gassed by the second round because of that. But Mendez tried to swing with him. Although we know what happened. The pressure completely got to him. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I know Aldo's a fantastic fighter. He's a legendary fighter, but he broke before the fight, and he walked out there and he was not ready to go.
No, he forgot his whole game plan and tried to rush in, and that's what he does. He talks you out of your game.
Mm-hmm. And he started it with Diaz.
But that's what I don't understand is what he's going to do. He tries to fire that first shot. Why doesn't somebody just walk up there, grab the mic first, and fire the first shot? Because that's what he does every time. He fires the first shot to everybody.
Yeah, and they're playing and they're catching. You got to give the hit. You can't take the hit.
I mean, even if it's an old football saying, but you still got to throw it out there first. Put him on the defensive first, because once he gets on the offensive, you're backpedaling the rest of the press conference.
Completely. And he went at Diaz basically by giving him an inferiority complex against his brother. So he tried to saying he called him Nick's little brother for most of the press conferences. And of course, the whole, I honestly like Nick and Nick's little brother, you know what I mean? How could you not like him? He's a little bleeping gangster from the hood, but at the same time, he coaches kids jiu-jitsu on Sunday morning and goes on bike rides with the elderly. He makes gun signs with the right hand and animal balloons with the left hand, which, I mean, that's a fantastic line. I don't care who you are.
That's good stuff.
You're a credit to the community. I've got world titles and multi-millions of dollars. You got $20,000 to show for your last fight, and teaches kiddies and jiu-jitsus on Sunday morning. You have to teach seminars all across California to just make ends meet. But he's immediately going after him. And he insulted Stockton, California, which everyone knows. If you're an MMA fan, you know how protective the Diaz's are of their hometown and their community. So he's immediately he's needling them where it hurts.
Mm-hmm. That's what he does.
And it's tactical. It's brilliant. You're poking a bear, and guys haven't even been able to deal with it. Nobody can talk with him.
Yeah, but see, he pokes the bear in the right spot, it seems like, every time, because he no matter what everybody says, oh, he won't do that to me. And then yet I didn't think he'd be able to do that to one of the Diaz brothers, and watching yesterday, he did it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and he still went after Dos Anjos during the presser too, by saying, "Oh, he ran away. He must have broken his foot running away from me." He called it a bruise, and I mean, it looks like Javier Dos Anjos' foot is broken, and you don't want to go into McGregor fight hurt.
No, definitely not. I mean, especially with a broken foot. I mean, come on.
Yes. So that's no contest. It was a smart decision to pull out. And then McGregor did the prediction thing where he won't make it out of the first round. He'll knock him out. Do you have, like, and this is weird because I usually don't, like, I know he predicts these things, but is there any reason to doubt him with this prediction? Like, I know Diaz is a fantastic fighter, but he lends himself to this kind of outcome. And I would not be shocked if Conor McGregor knocked him out in the first round.
I wouldn't be surprised at all, honestly. I wouldn't. I mean, again, maybe Nate has been training. I'm not sure if he was scheduled to fight possibly anytime soon upcoming, so maybe he had a little bit of a camp. But, I mean, I know these guys stay in shape, and I know they still continue to roll around and things like that, but there's a difference between getting ready a camp for a fight and you're just going in there and just trying to stay in shape. And again, I don't know how everybody trains differently, so maybe they're always training to be in thing. But I mean, this is going to be a 5-round fight. Well, it's scheduled 5-round fight, let me say that.
Yeah.
And I just right now, I mean, when you look at it, I'm kind of thinking, the only thing that Diaz has really got going for him is he has nothing to lose.
He's got absolutely nothing to lose. And he said himself, I mean, his strategy, I'm just going to kill or be killed. That's what I'm coming with.
And I think that's why it plays into McGregor's calling it in the first round, because he's going to come out trying to, set it up, and either he's going to kill or be killed, and that's what he's going to do.
And the McGregor strategy is always something I found very interesting, because when guys prepare for opponents, you prepare for a wrestler, so you'll bring in a wrestler to get your wrestling up. But somebody drops out, and then you get a complete kickboxer. Oh wow, I got to change this up. I'm not completely feeling my game plan. I have to make a change on the fly. McGregor doesn't prepare for an opponent. He said it multiple times, and in his training, from everything that I've read, he does not prepare for an opponent. He trains to make himself better every single day. Which, I mean, in a perfect world, that's how you do it.
No, I was going to say, maybe that's what makes him such a, the fighter that he is. He's ready. He's there to fight any type of opponent, and I mean, it works for him.
Absolutely. And, I mean, also looking at Conor McGregor, there's no way he ever fights at 145 ever again. I doubt it. What do you think?
I mean, I said it before. I thought that if he didn't fight at 145, he's not going to fight there.
I just don't see it happening. And I know.
If you do this kind of cutting and now you cut all the way back down, that's a lot of strain on your body. Yeah. I'm not saying it's not doable, but at the same time, when you go up to 155, you're probably, right now his camp, he's probably been a little bit heavier, and now he doesn't have to cut down as much. Are you going to?
He doesn't have to cut down at all for this fight.
Are you going to want to cut down to try to get back down to 145 now next time, or you just rather stay at 155? But ultimately, with the fighter that he is, though, I think he'll try to get back down to 145. But I don't know if he will.
And I don't think Frankie Edgar helped himself. And I'm a big Frankie guy. I don't think Frankie Edgar's helped himself throughout this entire process. And it could be his manager, who does tweet from his account a lot, by basically saying Conor's running from me. And he's been pleading and it's basically been begging for this fight. And it's gotten to the point where you read it on Twitter and it's like, dude, I get it. You want the McGregor fight. This is not helping you. It's making you look bad by being annoying and protesting and I want this fight. I deserve this fight. And Frankie's an absolute legend in the business. I don't know what his representation and managers thought this was the good course of action, because it seems because Diaz had the post-fight interview where he almost canceled the UFC's contract with Fox by cursing that many times on network television, but that was it. And he's like, yeah, I'll fight him, so what? And you see guys I want to fight Conor McGregor, I want to do this, I want to do that. To get the McGregor fight, there has to be a certain way you approach things. And Edgar, to me, he's missed his chance unless he's going to fight him at 155. Because there's no way I see Conor McGregor going back down to 145. Like you mentioned, it puts such a strain on the body cutting that much weight. And now at this point, if Conor can go in looking as big as he did during the press conference, and he looks like he's in phenomenal shape, and he's not going to be that skinny guy that we saw. Like you can go back and listen to an old podcast and remember us talking. Wow, McGregor looked really skinny in the weigh-in. Why, like he looks like a ghost. This is not. And then he goes out and he kind of fills back up again, but not as much. And you're like, I don't know. And then he goes out and knocks out Aldo in 13 seconds. So it's going to be, I mean, we'll talk about it more next week as well. And then we'll go over Holm and Tate and there's a couple other, and Lawler and Corey Anderson are on that card as well. There's plenty of ways to dig deep around this. If you want to read more about McGregor's kind of mental game that he's trying to play, I have the article up on the Full Mount. We have the full report, obviously, about the fight. So it's Conor's playing his games, and this should be, if everything goes to plan, just another $10 million gate, $1 million buy, Conor McGregor victory. But we've said it on this show before, and I will never, ever say it ever again. Nobody has 0% chance to win a fight in the UFC.
Well, you gave somebody almost a 0% chance, and they ended up pulling it off.
I gave somebody a 0% chance. You're giving me too much credit. I said there was no way Holly Holm was.
I thought you said there was like a .0001 or something like that.
No, I didn't even give myself that, which is good. So that's good. But next Saturday is going to be a hell of a night because regardless of the result, it's going to be memorable. And every Conor fight is an event. So it's going to be fun. And to me, this is just all fun. It's all fun and games. And the UFC, I mean, they could have hoped for one of their fighters not saying that every fighter in the promotion was on steroids. But other than that, I'm surprised they came out pretty unscathed.
Yeah, especially with those two.
Oh, yeah. McGregor is getting smarter and smarter with everything he says, though.
Yeah.
Like, he'll pull out a stupid line now and again, like saying like when he was in the TMZ interview that he would fight Jesus. Mm-hmm. But then TMZ kind of pulls out the worst in everybody, and then they'll try to pick and cut things.
Yeah, that's the way you do it, right?
Oh, that's the way journalism works, right? Pretty sure that's how journalism works. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, there's a fight this week that everyone's kind of forgetting about. It's kind of a big deal. We'll talk about that, where you can watch it, what time you can watch it, when we come back on TFM Live, the official podcast of thefullmountmma.com.
For all your latest news and rumors of the UFC, go to thefullmountmma.com. Now back to the TFM Live podcast. Here's Brian Coyle and Sean Stanley.
Welcome back, everybody, to the fullmountmma.com's official podcast, TFM Live. I'm Brian Coyle, joined alongside Sean Stanley. We just talked about UFC 196 and Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz and their amazing press conference. They've got, at one point or another, I think 215,000 people were watching that on YouTube. Like, during the middle of the afternoon.
It's crazy.
Like, that's insane. It's absolutely insane, the amount of numbers Conor pulls. But regardless, we'll talk more about McGregor and Diaz next week, and Conor's proficiency at talking trash, to use a better word than what it actually is. But people kind of forgot there's a fight this week, and it's a pretty big one. Over in London, England, on UFC Fight Pass at 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 1 p.m. Pacific, you can watch this card. It's got these two guys, I don't know if you've heard of them, Michael Bisping and
who?
Anderson Silva?
No.
Anderson Silva? Who's the, oh yeah,
Never heard of that
the
guy.
former arguably greatest middleweight of our time is fighting on a Fight Pass card in London against Michael Bisping. This is when originally it's supposed to be Bisping, Gegard Mousasi, and it's like, oh yeah, that's a cool fight. But Bisping again is fighting one of the, like, he's not getting that big fight because Bisping's reputation, and he'll admit this, he hasn't won big fights.
Yep.
He just hasn't. what it comes down to. And he's a great fundamental fighter. He's a fun guy to watch. He's a tremendous talker. And then you've got, in December, Dana White calling him and saying, hey, your fight in London is off against Gegard Mousasi. And he goes, oh, man, Bob, your fight in London is back on with Anderson Silva. 4 years ago, this is the opportunity of a lifetime for Michael Bisping.
Yeah.
Problem is, Anderson Silva's 40. He's lost his 2 fights and then thrown in no contest against Nate Diaz because of a positive drug test, which presumably was for steroids, but Anderson Silva's excuse was something different. Let's just put it that way. But he's off suspension now. And you get the 40-year-old Spider heading into London against Michael Bisping. I wrote a article, 3 reasons why I believe Michael Bisping will win, and I truly believe that Bisping will win. But I wanted to get your take first, Sean, because when we talk about this off air, you seemed very torn in this scenario. Explain to the people why this isn't as cut and dry as when you look at this analytically, it's this sets up for Bisping to win. Why is it such kind of a torn give and take here with these 2 fighters?
Well, for me, it's a torn because Anderson Silva, when you look at what he was, and I think I don't mean it by it, just he's lost his last 2 fights. The one was injury, things like that, and then the no decision with Diaz. But he's had such a long layoff, I guess you could call it, that you don't know which Anderson Silva you're going to get. I mean, if he's been in the gym and he's been training, you know what Anderson Silva can be. And if that is what he comes out there as, I don't know if there's a lot of people that will be able to beat him. But then on the flip side, you could get a totally different Anderson Silva. And then you're sitting there going, what is that I just watched?
Yeah. This guy, he was the greatest of all time at middleweight. From 2006 to 2013, nobody could touch Anderson Silva. It was insane. And I write this a lot in the piece. He's a bullet time fighter. He's a matrix fighter. He would just take a look at people and be like, hit me. And he would he'd move his head and feint and go back and forth and back and forth. And then the front, nobody was doing front kicks to knock people out until Anderson Silva did it. And now it's just a huge part of everyone's game, including the guy we just talked about, Conor McGregor. Silva revolutionized that division. Dominant. Yep. Completely dominant. And in his prime, you could not touch the guy. Everything was manipulated. He manipulated speed. He manipulated agility, timing, all of this stuff. And it was next level stuff. And then he got knocked the hell out by Chris Weidman.
Yeah, because he was playing around, and he thought that he was untouchable. And he got tagged.
Yeah. And then he fought Chris Weidman again. And he broke his leg. And didn't just break his leg. It was the worst injury probably that I've ever seen in the octagon. Yeah. Just watching UFC fights. Yeah. And that was prior to covering the sport. So when I UFC's on. I'm like, oh wait, Weidman is fighting Anderson Silva. So I was sitting there. I'm like, oh, this is a cool pay-per-view. And my dad, who's not really into it, he was more of a boxing guy and considered the UFC at the time. Now he's come around. The barbaric human chicken fighting argument that a lot of uneducated people make about the sport. And he's watching, and Silva goes in for a kick and just immediately crumbles, and he stands up and just yells. And I'm like, oh my God, that I just watched someone's leg break in half. And you hear Goldberg and Rogan talking after the fight. It's like, I don't know if he's going to ever come back from this. That's something that ends people's careers. It's amazing that Anderson Silva is still fighting. It's amazing that he fought Nate Diaz. And when he fought Nate Diaz, how did he look, Sean? Not good.
No, it didn't look like the Anderson Silva you're used to watching.
He won that fight, but he tested positive for PEDs. And you're thinking, I mean, it was the Wild West in the UFC prior to the USADA stuff. And Ronda Rousey's come out and talked about it, saying that it was amazing going from Olympic judo when you're tested whenever things can happen. And the UFC is like, yeah, you get some warning. They don't even watch you take the test. And so we don't know what happened. And you don't want to speculate and say Anderson Silva is completely tainted, his career is completely tainted by banned substances, because we don't know. Silva, as a fighter, is one of the greatest of all time. I want that not to get lost here. I don't see a way he wins this fight. The 40-year-old Anderson Silva that I saw against Nate Diaz, the 40-year-old Anderson Silva coming off a long layoff, the 40-year-old Anderson Silva who's not as fast as he once was, who was walking with a limp in one of the UFC embedded videos that came out today, and they showed Silva and Bisping, and Bisping's been loading up on these PED accusations and taunting him with this, and it's created real bad blood between both of them. His Bisping's gone overboard because it's like, dude, enough. But we get it. But nothing I see leading up to this is making me feel like Anderson Silva should be the favorite in this fight. And
not the favorite, but what makes you think Bisping can handle Silva?
The current version of Anderson Silva that I see now is a guy who can get hit. And Silva's best attribute when he was tearing through people was he would not get hit, and he would be doing the damage. And we never saw Silva get in trouble. We never saw Silva get nailed and have to face a lot of adversity. He had some tougher fights, but we never saw because Silva's whole game is based on timing and based on being able to bob and weave and move. And Bisping's the kind of guy who's not going to fall for this kind of stuff. And fundamentally, I think this is going the full 5 rounds, which is another reason why I think Bisping's got the edge. This is his opportunity. This is Bisping's best shot. If Silva loses this, I think this is it for him, because I don't see how you lose this unless he wants to keep fighting. I don't see the motivation. And if this is the biggest fight of Bisping's career, and this is getting over, I know he's never had a title shot and everything like this, but you beat Anderson Silva, and you put Silva out. This is a massive opportunity in front of the home crowd. It is a thing to have all of that motivation and all that behind. And Silva's the one coming back, and it has to win to be taken seriously again. Because if he goes out and gets knocked out by Bisping or something like that, then those worries and those whispers and the PED stuff is going to get louder and louder and louder. We don't want that to happen because Silva was such a magnificent fighter. But as far as Bisping, he's such a fundamental fighter. His cardio is insane. He will rack up strikes. He will not sacrifice the big knockout for being a smart, fundamental fighter. His footwork is fantastic. He can take smart damage to set up this kind of stuff he wants. He closes in the pocket well, and I know Silva's a Muay Thai expert in the clinch. It's great. But if Bisping can kind of stick and move and not fall victim to Silva's tricks, I think he's got the edge here. I don't think this is a blanket Bisping's going to win sort of fight. Don't get me wrong on that. And people on Twitter have been like, "Oh, you're completely wrong. Silva's going to wipe the floor with him," or how could you believe that Bisping has the advantage over this? And it's just, to me, analytically, Michael Bisping is still a good fighter. Not great, but he's still a good fighter. Anderson Silva has gotten knocked out, broken his leg, looked bad against Nate Diaz, and tested positive for PEDs in his last 3 fights.
So you're thinking that a good fighter can beat Anderson Silva at 40?
Yes, that is what I think.
Okay. Right.
Do you disagree? Do you find that absurd?
I don't find it absurd because the problem is my whole indecision is you can show me all these videos and all these training and hype videos and everything leading up to this fight. But until I see Anderson Silva in that cage, I mean, we said the same thing about, 3-4 podcasts ago about Dominic Cruz.
Well, Cruz, I believed in Cruz more than Anderson Silva.
No,
Cruz
I know, but
also,
but he had the long layoff, and you just didn't know. And I was one of the ones. I was like, you don't know what you're gonna get, and he came out and he looked fantastic.
Yeah, but I mean, Cruz has never looked better.
No, that's what I'm saying. So now, I mean, if you could get that from Anderson Silva, I mean, give it. I understand Dominic Cruz is not anywhere near 40, but if you can get that from Anderson Silva on here, I don't think Bisping stands a chance.
I mean, if you get that version of the Spider, Bisping's done.
And I don't think a mini would stand a chance. I don't think it's just Bisping. I just, in general, say if you can get an Anderson Silva that is focused and coming off a layoff where his body's recovered and he's 100% and he's the old Spider, I don't think there's many fighters or that will be able to go with him. I mean, ultimately there's going to be some as it goes, but I just that is my problem with this whole fight. I mean, not knowing, as you say, a good fighter could beat a 40-year-old Anderson Silva, but I don't think they could beat a revitalized Anderson Silva. And we don't know what we're going to get until that octagon closes, because you can sit there and look at as guys walk down and you can kind of see their body language and things like that. And you're like, but until that first, is that Anderson Silva? Is that the old Spider is he doing his things? What do you get? I mean, you can tell right away if it's going to be, the old Anderson of old or what. You'll be able to tell pretty quickly once that cage closes and that bell rings.
Sean, this segues perfectly into something I wanted to talk about too, and you mentioned Cruz. I was listening to Robin Black, of course, of the Fight Network, and the UFC videos, the sensational breakdown videos he does on that you can find on YouTube. He was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he mentioned ring rust and octagon rust and all that kinds of stuff. And he's talking about it when it comes to these kind of fighters, and Cruz was the guy who said it, and I'm glad you brought him up. Ring rust only exists if you make it happen. If you feel like there's ring rust, like if you don't feel comfortable in the cage, like if you don't put in that work to train and get back into it and do all this stuff, it will only feel uncomfortable if you let it. It doesn't apply to everyone. And if it applies to somebody and that's why fighters want to stay busy, because they get more comfortable the more they go into the octagon, the more it's like, oh yeah, this is business as usual. If you put yourself into that kind of mindset, it's up to Silva, who's been out of the game for a while and hasn't had a real fight. The Diaz thing is whatever you want to call it. He hasn't had a real fight since he broke his leg against Weidman. And that's 2013 we're looking at here.
Yep.
So Silva's going to have to go in there, and if he walks in and feels right at home and is like, I am at peace, this is perfect, let's go, Bisping is in trouble. But if he goes in and is kind of looking around like, okay, this is why I got to stick to my game plan. What is that again? What do I have to do? And the whole crowd is going to be against him. It's going to be hostile territory because he's fighting in London. And Bisping, the crowd, the card, the arena sold out as soon as Bisping was announced in the card. Not that it didn't before Silva. This is against Gegard Mousasi. This is probably no opponent for Bisping. And it sold out.
Yeah.
So it's going to be hostile territory. And it's weird because the Spider, out of his element, it's kind of new. He's 40 years old. It's just, to me, all signs point to the opposite way. But this is why we love this sport.
Yeah.
And this is why it was the perfect idea to put it on Fight Pass, to get people to watch Fight Pass.
Yeah. That, and you don't know what you're going to get on this fight. You really don't.
You don't know. You really don't know. Analytically, when I break it down, Bisping should win. All the signs point to a Bisping victory, and I got it by unanimous decision. But you can break fights down all you want, and I could be as good as I am at this, but still, when that cage door closes, if you feel like that, have that confident mentality, or you're like, oh damn, what do I got to do? Okay, he's throwing stuff at me that I've never seen before, and you panic and you change and you have to. If you're changing things on the fly instead of being at peace and doing it, you're done. And this is why we love this sport, is because literally anything can happen. We're getting a matchup that, would it have been better a couple years ago? Sure, because and in prime Silva, but was Bisping as good as he is now? Is this one of the best runs we've seen from Bisping? That's another question too. Yeah. And can he win the big fight? Can Silva?
That's the big question.
Come back. Yeah, and it's a question that's haunted him his entire career. Mm-hmm. And he said it in an interview with Helwani. They did like a 50-minute MMA fighting piece, which I watched at the beginning of it. It's pretty good. Where he's like, "This is my career, hometown, in front of everybody, friends and family, the biggest name in the history of the division, and I got to go out there and win. If I want to continue my career, and if I want to eventually get a title shot, and not be known as the best fighter to not have a title shot or not have the title." So he's under a lot of pressure. Silva, you win this, he's right back in it. You lose, who knows? If you lose badly, this is the end. So desperation versus desperation, two big names. I'm excited, man.
Oh no, I'm definitely excited to be watching it. And the same reason it's hard to pick is the same reason I want to watch it, is because the unknown. You both have unknowns. Bisping hasn't really proven himself in the big fight. Anderson Silva, you don't even know what you're going to get. And that mixture usually leads to some pretty good and entertaining fights when it comes UFC time.
Yeah, the undercard, one fight I did want to mention, you got Musasi and Talis Laitis, who recently lost to Michael Bisping, and Musasi coming off that loss to Uriah Hall, which was out of nowhere. Francisco Rivera and Brad Pickett. It's gonna be it's the fourth fight on that card. If you're tuning in early on Fight Pass, watch that fight, because it's gonna be a flurry of punches for about 2 minutes, and it's gonna be amazing once they do get to that flurry. So I want to give those guys some love, and they're the bantamweights. Not a lot of people were talking about that division, which they should be, especially if Faber was trying to fight Conor McGregor. But Bisping, Silva, Saturday live on UFC Fight Pass at 4 o'clock Eastern. So you'll probably get the Silva Bisping fight, I'm guessing, around 7 o'clock with this amount of fights in the cards. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 fights on this card. So maybe you won't get Silva Bisping until 8 o'clock.
I was going to say, that's going to be about 8 o'clock time.
So settle in, 7 o'clock-ish. If you want to watch all the fights in the card, go ahead. The UFC loves putting on a big card like this, but this is one that this is a career changer. And you don't get this that often in the twilight of people's careers. It should be very, very fun to watch. So anything else that you wanted to hit on that I may have missed? I know we focused heavily on 196 next week and this fight. Is there anything else you wanted to hit on, Sean?
No, just make sure you check out the articles as they go up on the fullmountmma.com, and thank everybody for listening to these podcasts.
Oh, of course. There was no other money related things that you wanted to talk about at all.
You wanted me to talk about.
I was just asking.
You were lobbing the softball for me to take a swing at.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of a return,
Yeah, and we, as listeners know, we love ourselves some fake fighting as much as we love ourselves some real fighting. So in honor of sports entertainment, correct?
There you go.
In honor of the return of one of the craziest performers in all of that industry, I will be titling this podcast "Here Comes the Money," because it's very effective for both Conor McGregor and Shane McMahon, who I never thought I would say in the same sentence at the same time. But sometimes there's always surprises, especially around WrestleMania season. It's great that the UFC and the WWE are putting on their biggest cards in the same month, which is kind of insane, but kind of awesome at the same time.
Yeah, and when especially when you get you see the rash of injuries and you wondered what they would do, and when that music hit, it was a crazy crowd, and
I popped.
Yeah, I think
time.
everybody did. I was just like, and unfortunately I was DVRing it, so of course I found out way before, but I got to watch when I got home, and I couldn't believe the crowd. I mean, it was like, you would have thought that he was, the Ric Flair or somebody, or Triple H or somebody out there. I think he got a tremendous ovation. I mean, it was chanting his name. You could see him and Vince were looking at each other like, oh, we got him. We got him.
Yeah.
They knew it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, oh, this is money right here.
The biggest pop since Stone Cold Steve Austin, man.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. That's the way it's got to be. Also, I don't know if we mentioned this, but I was completely wrong on my Super Bowl pick, so we can kind of brush that under now that the Combine's happening. Like, Carolina Panthers pick, completely wrong.
Yeah.
Cam Newton completely blew it, but, Peyton Manning, retire, you got a noodle arm, can't do it.
Yeah, but with a defense like that, I think I could go out there and win a Super Bowl.
Hey, if the Broncos need somebody, just warming up my arm, man.
Yeah, I can throw it 5 yards down the field for you.
Just warming up my arm. The other stuff, we'll mention it more as it gets closer. The Verdum Miocic fight looks like it's a go for May, which will be a very exciting card given the fact that Jacare Souza and Vitor Belfort is now the second fight on that card. So that's a loaded one in a soccer stadium as well. That will be something to keep an eye on. And the CM Punk back surgery, we've talked about it. I think we'll find out more about when he's actually going to come back in the next couple of weeks as well. Because if Punk isn't going to come back soon, that thing's looking like, and we joke about wrestling all the time, it looks like that, I don't know if he'll be ever doing any real fighting at that point.
Yeah, at that point, I don't know if you even, again, we talked about the back injuries, and it can go very well or it can go very badly, and that's not an injury you can go into a fight like UFC and try to make sure, that I'm not 100%, but I can make it work. With a back, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm. So your final pick for the Fight Night London, you going Bisping or Silva?
Oh, man. I knew this was coming, and I still it's still hard.
You got it. We have to start keeping track of our picks. We got to do some main event picks.
I'm going Anderson Silva.
Going Anderson Silva. I am going Michael Bisping, so we can revisit this next week, hopefully at our regularly scheduled programming time.
Yes, we should be good now.
And we'll break it down. So I want to thank everybody for listening. Remember, you can find us at The Full Mount on Twitter, thefullmountmma.com for all the latest breaking news and articles. My McGregor article is up. My Bisping article is up. Anderson Silva's side, the 3 advantages he might have. So anybody who's yelling at me on Twitter, you'll see the other side tomorrow from Sean. We'll have full recap and coverage of that, including odds for that and UFC 196 and all that good stuff on thefullmountmma.com. Follow us on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter if you want. I'm glad to defend all of my hot takes as much as you want. Michael Bisping or Conor McGregor related ones, especially at this point. Sean, you got anything that we should follow on your Twitter at SS Sports Talk?
No, just
anything specific?
Get in. We got some, just have some fun talking and different points of views. I don't mind arguing my side as well, and I listen to it all. Debate is good.
Yeah, debate is good. Don't embrace debate though. Then you get a little crazy, and then you're on ESPN and yelling at people.
Yeah, then I'll be on the 4-Letter Network.
Oh, that's true. They do good work. A lot of people at that network do good work. Just keep the friendly. Let's put it that way.
There we go.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. For Sean, I'm Brian. We're out.
The TFM Live Podcast is brought to you by TheFullMountMMA.com. Check us out on Twitter @TheFullMount.